I'm Evan Gudmstead, an instructor of application and web development at Rankin Technical College. And so I'm going to continue what I've been doing lately is kind of live streaming my learning, going through the .NET official documentation. And so I teach a .NET Core MVC class, and so MVC has been something I've taught for several years now. But obviously, there's a lot more underneath that .NET umbrella, and so I'm trying to widen not only my own learning and what .NET can offer besides the model view controller design pattern. And then once I learn, then figure out how I can bring it into my classes and improve not only myself but my students. And so yesterday I kind of had a live stream where I was getting into Blazor, and if I could summarize kind of what I did yesterday, I went through the basics of Blazor. So I went through this here, just more or less going through the reading. I read it myself and tried to make sense of it. And then at the end of that, you build your first Blazor app. So all that went fine. It was real simple. And then I kind of got hung up. And so where I got hung up, if you kind of go here, overview, and you see these other tutorials, and the next thing made sense for me to do was to do this to-do list app. And the reason I got hung up was they were spinning up their tutorials using the command line and this .NET new Blazor to-do list. So this is just using the default Blazor template in Visual Studio, which is if you kind of have Visual Studio Community, you say add a project. It says Blazor web app. And so there are other templates. I was getting really confused yesterday about, well, actually what, there's Blazor web app, there's Blazor server, there's server empty, there's WebAssembly, and there's WebAssembly empty. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 templates, and I was getting confused on number one, what template did I need to spin up, which the answer was this Blazor web app. That's kind of the default. My understanding is that this command spins up this template. But for whatever reason, when you do that, when you spin up that template, right, and then you underneath your components, I added a page which was this razor page, and so this was a /to-do. So the path to this URL is localhost /to-do, and then it's just a page title and an H3 is all that's there. And this interactive server, and you add this line, this interactive server, to that template, and all of a sudden it was crashing. And with the help of some ChatGPT troubleshooting, I found that basically there were 2 method calls that I needed to add on my program CS. So here on this add razor components, I needed to add interactive server components. So that was not there. I needed to add that and add interactive server render mode. So these 2 method calls, basically I needed to add that method call right there that I'm highlighting, and that method call right there. And for whatever rhyme or reason, either I didn't pick the right template, which is a possibility. I don't think so though. Or it's just not in the tutorial. Because here you add the link to go to your /to-do. So here I'm going to the /to-do. And well, I had to add those 2 lines of code, and now I go to /to-do and I can get to the page. And this was crashing before. So I don't know if it's kind of a wonky tutorial. I guess the one thing I didn't do was actually get into the command line interface. Like, I guess I could go to a regular old command prompt. Like, I wonder if I were to do this, right? So as I'm just continuing down this rabbit hole, just make a little temp folder here and open it up and open up a command line, open up a terminal window. And what if I spin that up here? Oops, that was the wrong command. That just made a components pages. Whoops. So let's do that. Okay. So let's just let's tinker with this. So I'm gonna go into here. I'm gonna add this to my solution. Let's see if I can just right click, add existing project, and I'm gonna go to my desktop. I'm gonna see if it was me or the tutorial that was wrong. Here's my temp, here's my to-do list, CS proj. Hopefully there's no conflict. Okay, no conflict. Here's my program CS. Okay, so notice here, add interactive server render mode was there, and add interactive server components was there. So that's really interesting that that command line command spun up a Blazor site that I don't know what template this is, because it's not the template that I was using, but it was missing this and it was missing that. So if I would have followed the tutorial and just used the command line as they suggested, it would have done it correctly, but I didn't. I just used Visual Studio Community. But nonetheless, something was learned. And so I'm going to continue using my to-do list 3, and I'm just going to operate. I'm going to finish up this tutorial. So we already got our nav link. So this, if I go to-do list app and I go layout nav menu, and here is my OI list rich. Now this class, obviously bootstrap icon, these are bootstrap icons, and OI, let's see if that's another difference. So if I go to components, layout nav menu over here, yeah, these are bootstrap icons as well. Okay. But there's my to-do. So I'm going to drag this over here. And I'm going to try launching this with hot reload. So if I launch this, I always have mixed results with hot reload. Let's see if this thing launched. Hot reload. Okay. So there's that. Okay, so now I'm going to build my model, which is a to-do item. So I'm going to have a C# class I'm going to build, and it says add a to-do item file to the root of the project. So here's the root, and I'm just going to add a class. This is a to-do capital item. And it's got two auto-implemented properties, a title, it's a string, it's nullable, bool is it done. Now there's a note on here that says if you're using Visual Studio, remove the namespace the Visual Studio generates for the class. So there's the namespace, and the tutorial says remove that. So I'll go ahead and do a build as I follow that instruction. Build succeeded. Okay, now we're going back to the Razor component. Adding a little code block here, private list of to-do item called to-dos is an empty array. Add a little razor for each. Var to do in to do's. Spit out the title inside of a list. Put those list items inside of a UL. So surround that like that. The app requires UI elements for adding to-do items to the list. Add an input and a button below the unordered list. So there's our unordered list. Here's our text box. Okay, save everything in the updated to-do razor in the command shell. The app is automatically rebuilt. The browser reloads. Okay, had to reload it myself. Hot swap. Let's see. Hot reload on file save. Hot reload. Didn't work, but nonetheless. When the add to do button is selected, nothing happens because we don't have an event handler. Add a method and register the method on the button click using the onClick attribute. Okay, so here, inside of our code, and up here, our placeholder, we say @bind equals new to do. Oh. To get the title of the new to-do item, add a new to-do string at the top of the code block. So here, private string, I wasn't sure what new to-do was. So we're binding this text to this string, new to-do. And now we're going to change this down here. If the string is not is null or white space, so we're checking to make sure it's not null or white space. As long as it's got something in it, then we add it to the list. I think I got one extra parenthesis. And then we, after we add it to the list, then we set it to, well, you could set it to null or empty string. Okay, so whatever the user types here, form control, that's a bootstrap class. Class is button primary. Okay. Haven't wired up a click handler for that yet, for that button. Got to wire up a click handler here. And here, inside of our for each, there's a list item. Let's see, to-do title. The title text for each to-do item can be made editable, and a checkbox can help the user keep track of completed items. Add a checkbox input to each to-do item and bind its value to the isDone property. Change the to-do title to an input element bound to the to-do.title with bind. Okay, so we're looping through to-do and each line item. It's interesting that there's an input checkbox field. Just use an HTML checkbox. That's annoying. Not that I need to style a checkbox with the Bootstrap class, but there is the class of form check input. Okay, so we're looping through our to-dos. For each to-do item, there's a checkbox that's mapping to the property is done, and we bind a text box to the title. And then these are our controls to add a new one. update the H3 to show a count of the number of to-do items. To-do. To-dos, which is our list. To-dos. Dot count. To-do. It's not to-do dot is done. Capital I. So this is showing us all the count, the number of any one that isn't done. If there's 3 or 4 that aren't done. And last but not least, we're going to on click of our button at on click add to, let's see, do, capital D-O. Pretty simple app. I already had it running, so I didn't need to relaunch it. Pretty ugly styling. So there's our 3 to-do items. You check it, and it goes off the list. And that takes it there. Now, I'm still kind of tripped up over where I started, which is what's the difference in these templates. So I'm going to go back to my tutorial, and I'm going to dig down that rabbit hole just a little bit more, see if I can't find an answer. So here's my documentation. Here's the overview, Blazor tutorials, to-do list app. Here's the command, and I'll ask Copilot here. Which template, which project template is used on this Blazor server app? Blazor server, okay. I thought it was the default, so it was a different one. So this to-do list, again, if I go back to my chat, this might, Blazor server app, this might explain it. To-do list. So this is 3, this is that. I'll just call it V2. So I'm going to say add Blazor server app. I almost wonder if, doubt it's an empty one, but maybe it's an empty one. Just call it V2. And see, that's another confusing thing, is why is it showing 6 and 7, but it won't show me version 8. So if I go to the properties of this, what version is it using? .NET 9. That's where I got tripped up when I was trying to do the server app. Add a new project. Blazor. Let me choose the empty one. Empty Blazor app. I've got 8 and 9 installed. Let me just go to my to-do list. It's this one. I don't think it's the empty one because it's yeah, it's got the counter and it's got the weather. Let me just choose .NET 7, sure. See, this is that's not right. That doesn't match. So, you know, found the answer, which is adding these methods. But it just doesn't, I can't find what template that uses. That's okay. So now did the basic ones, and let's do, so this one gets into a movie database, and with entity framework, so that's cool. And I've done this before. You know, I'm just redoing these tutorials to make sure I didn't miss anything. Create a Blazor web app, scaffold, Razor components, work with the database, validation, search, new field, interactivity. Local database that doesn't require authentication. Production apps should require authentication. So I'm going to close. Okay, so let's get started. Create a Blazor web app. And this is kind of cool. It lets you select your tooling. So, Blazor web app. So that's what I will do. I'll say File, New Project, Blazor web app. And I'm just going to do a pizza, Blazor pizza, and the project name. We're going to do create a solution. Authentication is none. Interactive. Maybe that's what I was doing wrong. I didn't select server. That's gonna be it. That's what I did wrong. I didn't check the server. That's it. Good. Interactivity location is page component. Sample pages is selected, not selected. Authentication is none. And we're choosing .NET 9. Man, I can't believe that took me that long to realize that this was a drop down that I didn't select. Today I learned. There it is. It's exactly what it is. Press F5, which is running with debugging. So if I hit F5, it's going to ask me about an SSL certificate, and I'm going to hit yes. It didn't ask me about SSL. I'm glad I found that drop down because I was so confused. Okay, properties, launch settings.json, familiar with that. wroot is static files, familiar with that. Components has layout, pages. A component is a self-contained portion of the UI with optional logic. Components can be nested, reused, and shared. Components are implemented using C# and HTML in Razor component files with the .razor extension. Typically, components are nested within other components and not directly reachable or routable at a URL. Wait a minute. Typically, components that are nested within and not directly routable at a URL are placed in the components folder. Oh, okay, so here, these are not directly routable. Like app.razor is like, you know, your home page. You're not navigating to slash, it's just your home page. Components that are routable are inside of component pages. So /weather is routable. Home page. This is the app.razor is kind of like the shell. Okay. And then routes is where the routable area. So the outer template HTML5, and then let's see, home.razor is inside of that. Inside of the routes. The components layout, that's what it sounds like. Main layout.razor is the main layout component. It looks like that's going to be probably hidden. Got a main. And app.razor. We are linking to Bootstrap out of the box. Your own custom CSS. App CSS, and another couple CSS sheets, 3 CSS sheets. Now, these also have associated CSS files. These main layout Blazor CSS that is used for main layout, and same thing for the nav menu. And the imports.Blazor. Let's find imports. And so the imports file includes common Blazor directives to include the app's Blazor components. Blazor directives are reserved keywords, prefix the @ symbol that appear in the Blazor markup, and change the way component markup or components are compiled or function. Okay, that's a mouthful. Include directives to include Blazor apps. So all of your Blazor components kind of have these using statements. All of the other .Blazors have these using that basically by default. So you can get access to those namespace and all of the components that are in them. That's why when I was looking just a little bit earlier, there was like a checkbox that was not an HTML checkbox. It probably came from one of these namespaces. Probably this components namespace. Okay, app.Blazor, the root component that includes HTML, the routes component, and the script tag for the Blazor web.js right here. The root component is the first component that the app loads. The routes component sets up the routing for the app. So there's a router, and very similar in React. There's React Router DOM. So these are going to help us create those routes that at the end of the day, it's pretty simple to code a route on the front end. Okay, app settings JSON is where we have our connection string. Warning, do not store app secrets, connection strings, credentials, passwords, pins, private C# code, or private key tokens in client-side code. Always insecure. In testing and staging in production environments, server-side Blazor code and web API should use secure authentication flows that avoid maintaining credentials within project code or configuration files. Outside of development testing, we've recommended avoiding using the environment variables to store sensitive data, as environment variables aren't the most secure approach. For local development, the Secret Manager tool is recommended for securing sensitive data. Secret Manager tool. For more information, this is something we'll have to look into. View or download. Never store passwords or other sensitive data in source code or configuration files. Production secrets shouldn't be used for development or test. Secrets shouldn't be deployed with the app. Production secrets. Azure Key Vault. Okay. Come back to that. Program CS, where we start up our web app. Program CS file contains the code to create and configure the requesting pipeline of the app. The order of lines in the Blazor web app template changes across releases of .NET, so the order of the lines might not match the order of the lines covered in this section. So it's going line by line. creates the web application. A web application builder creates the app with pre-configured defaults. Razor component services are added to the app by calling add Razor components, which enables Razor components to render and execute code on the server, and add interactive server components to services to support rendering interactive server components. The web application is held up by the app variable, and the following code is built right there. Next, the HTTP request pipeline is configured. Exception handling middleware processes errors. So here's use exception handler for exceptions. HTTPS redirection middleware enforces HTTPS by redirecting HTTP requests if it's available. So it uses HTTPS. Anti-forgery middleware enforces anti-forgery protection from form processing. Map static assets, routing endpoint conventions, map static files such as images, scripts, and style sheets. Map Razor components maps the components defined in the root app not given to and renders routable components. Add the other one right here. Configures interactive server-side rendering support for the app. Says this line makes the app capable of adopting interactive server-side rendering, which isn't relevant to the last part of this tutorial. Over the next several articles, the app's components only adopt static server-side rendering. And then we run the thing and we're off. So okay, add and scaffold a model. Okay, so we're going to add a models folder. And class. Okay, kind of telling the database what data type we want to use in the database, how many places before and after the decimal. Okay, so we got a pizza ID. Name of the pizza would be, pepperoni pizza. Descriptions, a paragraph, and a price. And you got the green squigglies, so you mark these as nullable. Get rid of that. And just for a date only, we'll do like a created time. We'll say created date because it probably makes sense to do date time. That'll have a date and a time. Okay, 18 digits, 2 decimal places. Build solution. Okay, now we're going to scaffold, which means generate some code for us. In this section, we will scaffold a database context and a UI for managing, in my case, pizzas. Code generation framework for .NET. You are scaffolding to quickly add a database and UI code that interacts. We're going to right-click Pages, add new scaffolded item. Open the installed common Blazor Razor component. Razor components using Entity Framework CRUD. Select Add. The template will remain CRUD in the model. Select Pizza. In the add data context, the class name is generated. Use the default generated value, select add. Oh, for the DB context, select the plus sign button. Yep. Blazor pizza context, select add. Yep. And SQL Server looks good. Select add. Okay, so now we're going to go into our app settings JSON, where a connection string is used to connect to a local database. So app settings JSON. Yep. So I want to use local DB, which is this one here. That's right. And my database name here, I'm just going to call this Blazor Pizza. I'm going to delete all this extra jazz. And again, another warning about storing all this connection string info in app settings. Don't store connection strings in client-side code, always insecure. Use the secret manager tool. It's the same warning as before. I'm going to save my app settings JSON and close that. So here's creating a new pizza. Here's all these controls. These Blazor controls. So we got, if I kind of expand this, create, delete, details, edit, index. So there's all my CRUD operations. And then there's a data folder, which has my context file. Very similar to what we're doing in the MVC class. Very familiar with this process. It's impressive how fast you can spin this up, do a full CRUD app with Blazor, and that scaffolding's crazy. The component files are described in greater detail in the next part of the tutorial. The database context is described later. .NET Core is built with dependency injection, which is a design pattern for achieving inversion of control. It's a fun term, inversion of control between classes and their dependencies. Services such as EF Core database context are registered with dependency injection during startup. You can kind of see here, this is doing that. So this was added so that we can pass a database context. Let's see. So we can pass a database context into our controllers. Services such as the EF Core database context are registered with dependency injection during the application startup. So here, add context factory, adding it to our services, passing our pizza context. So this is the dependency injection that it's talking about, and registering that during the application startup. So that line 7 was added. And that allows us to, again, work with our database. Hey.
You think you got a little time this afternoon to take me somewhere?
Where do we got to go?
Just in Edinburgh. Probably like, I think it's like 22 minutes away.
I typically leave in about an hour.
That's fine.
Okay.
I mean, we can go now.
Okay.
I just want to pick up my report.
Okay. Let's go 2:30.
Okay.
Wait a minute. Yeah. It's 22 minutes. Which direction? West?
It's
South?
well, give me a second. I'll text you.
Okay. Okay, the quick grid component is a Razor component for displaying data in a tabular form. So here on the index component, so if I go pages, index, quick grid, the scaffolder places a quick grid component in the index component to display pizza entities, calling add quick grid entity framework adapter on the service collection. Oh, we're back here. Add quick grid entity framework adapter. Adds an EF core adapter for quick grid to quickly recognize EF core supplied instances to resolve database queries asynchronously for efficiency. In combination with use developer exception page filter, captures database related exceptions that can be resolved by using entity framework migrations. Okay. Create the database using EF core migration feature. So we're doing code first, entity framework. These classes are created. The database is created and updated from the entity classes. I haven't done it this way before. In Solution Explorer, double-click Connected Services. In Solution Explorer, double-click Connected Services. No idea where that is. Connected Services. I'm in Solution Explorer. No idea where that is. Connected Services. So maybe it's off of View. Connected Services. I mean, I know another way to do this. I'm just going to do how I know how to do it. Add migration initial. And okay, refresh databases, Blazor pizza. There's my pizza table. Test the app, run the app, go to /pizzas. So I'm going to go here. Let's see, components, pages, pizza, /pizzas. Pretty crazy. Well, that's funny that the time and date stamp is the year 1. So we would have to obviously some improvement can be made there. Really easy to get CRUD operations up and running. Now the tutorial says it's going to break, and it didn't break. After the index, create a new link. After the add a movie, in the following example, the matrix was added. Selecting the create button adds it to a database. When you select create, the movie data is posted and saved. Yeah, it didn't break, so. Okay, learn about Razor components next. So I'm on part 3, and I think I'm going to continue tomorrow. So I'll stop here as I'm going through that. Kind of takeaways here, some different scaffolding features that I did not know existed in Blazor. When I've done CRUD before in Blazor, everything was manual. I created all of this by hand. And certainly scaffolding, once you know what you're doing by hand, can help a lot. And just kind of, it always helps to kind of reflect on the code that was created, and I know I do that in the rest of the tutorial. So we'll go ahead and stop here. And I'm going to pick this back up tomorrow.